You just heard Crystal Ann and Alison Hell from the fantastic Annihilator record, Alison Hell. This is the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And, of course, we ended last week's podcast by talking about how we would elect, I guess, a certain record from the kind of Canadian thrash era into our kind of own bizarre Hall of Fame. And this is the record that we chose. And it's a strange one. It kind of caught you and I off guard. It's not a band we've been listening to for a long time.
Within the last couple of years.
Yeah, really.
I mean, the name was always kind of synonymous in the thrash circle, especially, the record came out in 89, recorded in 88 and kind of sat around for a year, but that's like the tail end of the thrash scene, really.
Yeah.
And I always heard the name, and I thought the name was stupid, and I thought the logo was stupid, and the album cover was stupid, and I never heard them.
Yeah, it was just, like we talked about last week with bands like Razor and an Exciter and things like, sometimes the simplicity of the names, even Anvil to some extent, like these were just, bands that I kind of didn't steer clear of, but I definitely didn't go out of my way to like discover and find.
Well, when you're listening to like, Dismember and Entombed and all that stuff, you just kind of discredit this stuff because that's probably silly and old and whatever.
Yeah. And it's weird, I don't know, and Mark and I talk about this often, how, in our later years of metal, it allows us the opportunity to sort of go back and listen to the stuff that we sort of missed out on. And that seems to be almost the entire, like, Canadian scene, really.
Yeah, except for, like, Cryptopsy and a handful of other bands.
Yeah, exactly. But this is, I guess, an album that, depending on who you ask, there's some people who worship at the altar of it because of, Jeff Waters, and we'll talk a little bit more about him in a second. There's some people who think that this is, just an exercise in guitar shredding technique, and they don't really kind of get into the heart of the album. But I think there's a lot, going on, and there's a lot of like really fantastic things that kind of amalgamate all these different aspects of thrash that were going on in America.
I mean, it's a great way to like end the scene almost.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good stamp for that.
And this record sold 250,000 copies, on Roadrunner. It was up to the date of whenever the liner notes for the CD were written, I think in 2002 or something. That was the highest selling Roadrunner release
record.
up to that point.
Which is crazy to think about,
Yeah, I mean, because they really never had much of... they toured with Priest, but I believe that was in Europe. And they've never really penetrated Canada or the U.S. market. It's always been Japan and Europe.
Now, I wonder, I think that statistic that you said, I think that's for a Roadrunner debut. I think, because
is it?
I would imagine, because there's got to be a part of me, even though I know, like, I think Nickelback has since, like, is now the selling Roadrunner album. I think Bloody Kisses, that record alone, I think had to have sold more than 250,000.
Oh, this says 250,000 copies worldwide. Becoming Roadrunner's biggest seller to date.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. I would have thought Bloody Kisses would have sold more than that, but because that's a Roadrunner record. You know what I mean? Just because that had like such kind of mainstream recognition, but
that shows how little metal actually sells in compared to like pop records.
It freaks me out sometimes to think about that. But I guess you can argue with whether or not this is the crowning achievement of the thrash metal scene. I don't know if that's why we elected it into the Hall of Fame. I think that Slaughter and some of those other bands we played were had their own awesomeness in their own sort of ways, but I think we wanted to highlight this record because this is one that has such a lot of unique dynamic things happening all over the place, and it's one that we recently kind of got into, and so it's like we were kind of jazzed to sort of spotlight it, I guess. So.
And I think this is kind of everybody. Well, I think most Annihilator fans will agree this is probably like they never really hit this peak again.
No, there's like really bits and pieces throughout scattered records. Yeah, but so tell us, I guess, a little. You've been doing quite a bit of research about, I guess, the origins of the band and some.
Well, 1984 from in Ottawa, where they originally from. I believe they moved to Vancouver. Later on, correct?
Yeah, after most of the guys quit, he relocated. Jeff Waters, the guitar player, relocated to Vancouver, the West Coast.
Yeah, Waters has basically been kind of like the Chuck Schuldiner of this band. It's been a rotating lineup since the beginning.
Yeah.
And there was two previous vocalists. I don't know if this stuff, if they perform live or this was just demo recordings or what. But before the actual recording lineup for Alison Hell, which had Randy Rampage of DOA fame.
Punk hardcore fame.
Yeah, I mean, a really fantastic hardcore band from he was in the band in 80 and 81, and he was the bass player for DOA, along with Chuck Biscuits, was the original drummer for DOA, and Joey Shithead on vocals and guitar.
Nice. And Chuck Biscuits, ironically, went on not only to Danzig, but went on to a band that I kind of love and adore, a band called Sugartooth.
And he was also in Black Flag for a while.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's crazy. So,
but I think this kind of shows, I think, how like interwoven those scenes really were. Seems like as soon as you hit a certain peak playing hardcore, you would either go like what DRI and a lot of these other bands did, and do that kind of crossover style, even like Suicidal Tendencies
or COC or
jump completely jump right over. And a lot of people actually even. Waters kind of says Rampage isn't a great vocalist, but he's got a lot of attitude.
Oh, tons of emotion and attitude and snarls and stuff.
This is the only vocalist I actually like from the whole discography that I've heard so far.
Oh, yeah.
I just think
a lot of it's pretty rough.
He's got, the weird like falsetto stuff that we heard in Alison Hell.
Yeah.
And then he's got like almost this like this Milla Petroza kind of delivery.
I wrote on my notes Millie snarl.
Yeah. And there's like this kind of like proto-death metal stuff happening in it as well vocally.
There's a lot of Bobby Blitz from Overkill type stuff going on too.
And I don't know exactly who did the vocal, because if you watch the video for Alison Hell, it shows Jeff Waters doing all the high pitched stuff and doing that.
I know he does the backing vocals on the record, so it might be him on the record.
They show him doing it in the video. I don't know if what the differentiation,
the correlation,
too, but and also I learned a new term, Teutonic thrash metal. Have you heard that term before?
German. The Germanic.
But I thought Teutonic was some kind of sound thing.
I always heard Teutonic associated with the Scorpions, that they were like the innovators of, I guess, the Teutonic.
Well, Teutonic thrash, which I've never even heard the term. It's kind of ridiculous, but it goes in with the Bay Area and all that. And these guys were kind of tail end of the whole scene, so you definitely hear all that stuff coming. Lots of Exodus, Metallica.
I said Peace Cells,
Slayer,
Peace-Cells era Megadeth stuff that you'll hear throughout the record. And you have a cool little story about himself, Jeff Waters, and kind of how he got into music a little bit.
I was watching a bunch of interviews with him. I guess he's sponsored by Gibson right now, so he does a lot of these like little snippet interviews or whatever online. And he's the guy's totally clean and sober, really like gregarious and good shape. He's kind of like the George Lynch of thrash or something.
Canadian thrash,
getting into good shape. But like at age 7, his folks basically like got him guitar lessons, so he started learning classical and jazz, and he was really kind of progressing well and showing a lot of that this was like something he might want to pursue in his life.
Yeah.
And his folks are like, oh yeah, as soon as they heard about the whole like the metal thing, when he started getting into that, they're like, oh, we'll put up with you in an apartment, we'll put you, take you to whatever school you want to go to if you want to pursue classical or jazz or whatnot. And he chose the side of metal, but the whole deciding factor, which I thought was pretty funny, was the day that Defenders of the Faith came out in '84.
Yeah.
It was either go to school, finish your math exam, and graduate, or stand in line to get Defenders of the Faith, and he got Defenders of the Faith.
Clearly a metal warrior.
He what was it, like 7 years later, he ended up touring with Priest as well, which is
on the Painkiller tour.
And he's basically, he's made money since he started Annihilator.
Yeah.
He's never had to take day jobs or whatever, and it's just based on that whole that ravenous kind of like Japanese and European crowd.
Sure. Yeah, because I don't think every so often you'll see like Annihilator playing shows in our area, but it's in very small venues, and they're
kind of one-off things.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. And one other story that we got actually after we recorded the last show and talked about Exciter is I got a copy of Heavy Metal Maniacs from Exciter, or is it Heavy Metal Rising or Heavy
Metal Maniac?
Yeah, I think I was right. Yeah. And they talk about on there how at one of the very first Exciter shows, there were these two like geeked out fans that like kept wanting to talk to him, and one of the guys was young Jeff Waters, who ends up remastering that record years later and
doing the liner notes and stuff.
Yeah, and so it's pretty cool. But so back to the actual record. Once they get their kind of act together, as Mark said, they record this thing in '88, and it doesn't get put out until September '89 on Roadrunner. So you've got Waters on bass and guitar on here. You got Randy Rampage, and then you got Ray Hartzman on drums. And there's not really. He's kind of the Louis Clemente of Canadian drummers or something. You know,
he's not bad, but he's
pretty stock.
There's no frills.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty stock. But I mean, there's nothing bad about his drumming. It's just there's nothing like super exciting, nothing Dave Lombardo-esque or Haugland or even.
Well, and then live we've got Anthony Greenham on guitar and Wayne Darley on bass.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, and you can get a copy of Alison Hell. Actually, they have it repackaged with, was it Never Neverland?
Yeah, 2 from the vault.
Yeah, on the Roadrunner. So, it is available, unlike some of the Canadian stuff that we played last week, which is really super expensive, like the Sacrifice and some of the Razor stuff is hard to get. But obviously what you heard there, Crystal Ann, is as Mark was kind of talking about, he's very well trained. Yeah, there's his classical guitar. And it kind of has that epic thrash opening kind of thing. Yeah, like Battery or Fight Fire with Fire or something like that. But Alison Hell, like the opening minute or so before any vocals come in there, I mean, I really feel like he's kind of like showing like a lot of his techniques off. He's like almost running you through the gamut of what you're going to hear thematically throughout the record. All these different kind of melodic styles, shred styles, technical styles, just straight thrash.
The way the album's bookended with started out with this classical piece, and then it ends with Human Insecticide, which is
the most furious
barn burner shredder. I mean, the whole album kind of builds momentum as we go.
Sure, yeah, and there's a lot of things happening in the middle of this song. I mean, it's got a pretty epic guitar solo there. We were pointing out that you heard some Adrian Smith, Iron Maiden stuff. I hear kind of Queensryche kind of stuff.
It's across the map. I mean, he's like a kind of a voracious sponge for all these other guitar players, and apparently, I think it was. I know there's a lot of Priest, who's one of the big influences, but basically a lot of classic rock as well.
Yeah,
but as he's gone on in his career, he's really embraced his kind of niche, area, or in the metal scene, and really have gotten a lot of accolades and become friends with a lot of like extreme metal acts. And he's had Mike Amott and Jesper Stromblad from In Flames and Lex Lalaho. I think it was the metal record from like 82 or from 2002. We got a lot of guests on there, but he's very revered in the whole scene.
Yeah, and I always hear him kind of held up like that. And
I never knew who he was.
And whenever I read about the guy, he almost had like a Steve Vai, Satriani, Lynch kind of aura to him, in that like he was probably respected more from guitar players than he was from like music critics or something. And I think that's maybe why I was leery of checking it out, because I didn't know if it would just be like sort of guitar masturbatory kind of stuff and shred records.
He's a great lead player, but he's also a good songwriter.
Yeah,
which is kind of
that's the surprising part about hearing this record is it's his guitar style. I wrote down is if you took like a George Lynch type kind of player from like 80s stuff, but then put him into like a thrash speed metal band mold, because he has all those sort of flourishing techniques. He's not sloppy in any kind of way, and he's flashy, but not in an Yngwie Malmsteen like really empty kind of lifeless sort of way.
No, he picks his notes carefully, I think.
Yeah, and he's able to like keep that thrash groove always going and that sort of momentum and and that's what makes this such a cool record.
I mean, there's another interview that I was listening to with Waters where he was talking about all that classical and jazz training really got his left hand really dexterous so he can move around the neck. But it took him a while to get his chops down for his picking hand, and he was like all he had to do is like listen to Kerry King Inside Now and figured out how to do the down picking,
the speed pick stuff. Yeah, and you'll hear a lot of that in the later part of the record.
I've tried playing along with it, and it's like your hand's about ready to fall. It's like a Mortal type speed, but it's all palm muted.
Yeah. I remember Grindcore Coon, who's done a few shows with us from time to time, when we were kind of playing around in high school, and he was trying to learn all the Slayer songs, and I mean he was just like it's not hard, it's not hard note playing or anything, it's just speed. It's just speed, and
it's your picking hand,
it's something that's not developed.
That's one of the hardest things to do. I think.
And for Jeff it was interesting because he's left-handed, so he was better playing that stuff, and whereas like the right hand speed picking stuff was way harder for him because he didn't use his right hand as much.
Gotta flip the guitar around.
Yeah, there you go, like Hendrix.
Have you heard of Joel McKeever?
Doesn't ring a bell.
He's a writer that does a lot of like metal / rock history type stuff. He's not necessarily held in really high regard. He's not like an Ian Christie or something as far as being an expert. I think he kind of runs the line of being kind of one of those guys that throws out a book every year based on some, unauthorized history of Slayer or whatever. But he ranked Jeff Waters number 3 greatest metal guitarist ever on his 100 greatest guitarist list.
Who did he have above him? Did you?
Number 1 was Mustaine, and number 2 was John Petrucci
from Dream Theater. So.
He's okay. And then Zakk Wylde was number 4, Dimebag, Iommi. I mean, the list is kind of screwed up.
Sounds like a Metal Edge or list or something, like in some weird way. But.
Yeah, I mean, like Trey from Morbid Angel beat out Hetfield, and I mean, it was just a weird. I don't know how. I didn't read the book, so I don't know how he justified his choices, but it was cool to see Waters that
Waters was respected. Yeah, and I mean, certainly he blows my mind. I know, this is a record that we actually got. And I remember we were driving to a Keel Hall show in Lansing. It was you, myself, and Grindcore Coon, and we were driving, and we put this record on, and it was the first time you guys had heard it. And I think I had heard it, I had listened to it once, and I kind of was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And I think I had told you something like the previous week. I was like, "Yeah, you should check out some Annihilator. They're not bad." And
because we've been talking about the name for years on the podcast. Like I put them in the same regard as Nuclear Assault or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally,
just a band like we don't know much about, and. By about the 3rd or 4th song, I mean, we were, just kept turning up. And
oh yeah, I mean, before we did the show, I listened to it 6 or 8 times.
Yeah,
straight through. It's a fantastic record.
Yeah. So let's get back to the record. We've got a trio of tunes. Now I wrote this down, and maybe it's just because of the momentum thing, but if there was a weaker part of the record, this is it. But it's not like these songs are weak songs necessarily. It's just they're not as strong as the opening track and the furious end.
They're not as complex either. Yeah. Especially like Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade is more vocally driven, I think, than guitar driven. It's not as complicated as Alison Hell.
Yeah, and it's more like early Kill 'Em All, like just sort of primitive, kind of thing.
A lot of Exodus-ish kind of riffs.
And the song we're going to start off with is W.Y.T.D, which is Welcome to Your Death. And this has a big Priest kind of feel to it. A lot of new wave of British heavy metal kind of stuff going on.
But you also, the KK Downing kind of vibe of the harmonics,
sure,
as the notes or whatever.
And he does some. You'll hear later on the record. He does a lot of stuff with some really cool like pinch harmonic kind of stuff.
The opening riff almost sounds like something that would have been on Ram It Down.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and this, they toured with him around that era though, the Ram It Down Painkiller kind of era. And you also hear like a lot of progressive qualities. I mean, that's one thing, that I think he naturally does in there is he adds like progressive thrash kind of technical things in there without it like being awkward or like spotlight driven. Like, hey, look at me, I'm doing something.
It's there because it makes sense and it makes the song better.
Yeah, and you'll hear it especially in the midsection of this song where you get like kind of that classical style. Mixing with like kind of shred, mixing with the new wave of British heavy metal, like twin melodies and different things. Like right around the 130 mark, it kind of kicks in. And then we got Wicked Mystic. Any words for that? I wrote early Megadeth. That's what I hear is like way like even pre-Peace Cells Megadeth.
It's not like he's aping Megadeth riffs, but the approach to riffs, which Mustaine's always been a really great player and songwriter to some degree, but I think not as cohesive as a lot. But I think he's very underrated as a songwriter as well.
Yeah,
just because how complex the riffs are, but not overly complex to where it's just like Steve Vai or something. It's like it actually makes sense and propels the song, and it's brutal still.
Yeah. It's not just technique. It's songwriting.
It's not
kind
just
of
scales. Yeah.
And I wrote for this song, Wicked Mystic, that this is kind of like the most straightforward of the songs on the record, but it's almost like a template for like the Annihilator sound. It's the simplest of all the songs, but yet like it's variations of this kind of style that make up for the most part this record of Alison Hell. So, and then Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade, which is
Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade.
Either you love that title or you think it's kind of on the retarded side, but we've already talked about that with Canadian titles and lyrics that it's not always their fine point, but Annihilator's a little more highfalutin, I guess, in comparison to like Anvil and
because that was one thing that Waters brought up is that they've never really been drawn to the occult at all or anything remotely satanic. They've always been more on the aggression side.
Sure.
And so all this, especially at this era, he was a pretty diehard alcoholic.
Yeah.
So he said a lot of lyrics and stuff were he was just pissed off in the first one, and they as they progress throughout their career, they get a little bit more personal. But
yeah. Well, there's even some things that we'll talk about later, some like Legea and Schizos and stuff like that are more they're dealing with more, I guess, like later day Metallica themes, you know, like Human Mind and stuff like that, which is a little deeper than
Sepultura type
Anvil
stuff.
and stuff like that. So.
Oh, and real quick before we go to the set, the list or the new the 3 slower songs on the set. Alison Hell, based on a true story
I forgot about
of a young girl who told her parents that the boogeyman was visiting her at night, and the pleads went up on deaf ears and the parents, and eventually she fell into the grips of insanity because of this. So I don't know how true this is, because this is also around the time of Dream Warriors.
Yes.
And a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street kind of vibes.
Again, going back to George Lynch.
To the videos. So.
You can never escape him on Requiem Metal Podcast.
So yeah, if you watch the video, there's a little crawl in the beginning. It says, this is based on a true story of Alice.
And some people, I think the cover's pretty hilarious and cool in its own, like, kind of
Well, and you've
way.
got this teddy bear that's standing.
You got the evil doll, you know.
This really looming shadow coming down, and it's a mix of everything's painted on it except for the girl, which is kind of weird. It's a photograph superimposed over
It reminds me of something like King Diamond would have done.
Oh, it totally does, yeah.
So, which, you know, you can't go wrong with the King.
Yeah.
So, but all right, so let's get back to some music. We got W.Y.T.D, Welcome to Your Death, Wicked Mystic, and Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade.
It's an election, all of us. No one is exempt. It's brutal evil in our soul. Is this the devil's intent? A derelict of family gods, a feeling from within. Weak minds are perfect prey for corrosion to begin. Shall fight. The battle is forsaken. Shall fight. The dark side has awakened. Wicked mission. Wicked mission.
That's Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade, Wicked Mystic, and W.Y.T.D. So, yeah. So we're moving along through this, and now we're to my favorite part of the record, I guess. And I don't know.
Word Salad?
Word Salad is one of my favorite songs, actually. It's
one of the worst song titles on the record.
It is. I think this song and maybe Human Insecticide might be my two favorite songs on the record. But
okay.
Do you have a preference after having listened to this so much? Or?
Well, Alison Hell, of course, but then Human Insecticide, I would think even Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade is pretty... That and the Schizos, part 1 and 2 is pretty sweet. The first half's kind of an instrumental-ish.
Yeah. I mean, really, it is mostly an instrumental. It reminds me of like "To Live Is to Die" or something from Metallica.
I think the only lyrics in it are just
Schizo.
Never alone.
Never alone. Yeah, which is a cool title.
Yeah,
really. I mean, it's a great concept when you really think about what that song title kind of means. But Yeah, the next trio of songs increase the pace, I guess, or at least increase the complexity, because like Wicked Mystic and Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade are pretty straightforward tunes, which is cool, and that fits the style for Randy Rampage in terms of like, the hardcore kind of like straightforward kind of style that he brings to the table vocally.
He's a pretty interesting showman too in the video.
Is he?
Because I think he's kind of an egomaniac to some degree, and he's
called Randy Rampage.
Yeah,
which sounds like the wrestler
had
from
ridiculous names.
Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, I think he's, especially you go to his website now and stuff, and I think he's really, or he's kind of his entire image is based on past glories.
Yeah,
kind of thing. But I really dig the dude. I think it's cool to jump from a really seminal hardcore punk band to a really seminal thrash band.
Yeah,
and then he's doing some other stuff now that I'm not gonna. Yeah. Pretend that I enjoy, but yeah, I enjoy the guy, but he's also, I think, a bit of an egomaniac to some degree.
What kind of stuff is he doing? Like hair metal kind of stuff?
By the looks of it, I would say yes, but it's probably not.
Okay, yeah, it's probably just like mid-paced kind of heavy metal stuff or something.
Heavy metal,
Teutonic metal, maybe.
Yes.
But Word Salad. There's a lot going on in this next tune here that I've kind of wrote down. I don't know what your thoughts were, but I thought it had a pretty testament like opening. Again, this mixed bag of thrash bands that are kind of come to the table. And one thing is that we haven't mentioned is how awesome of a bass player Waters is. He writes all the bass riffs on this whole record, and there's a really like heavy presence of bass, which sometimes can get buried on thrash metal records.
That's not at all. Is. Yeah, it's definitely, and it's all hand fingered as well. It's got that vibe to it. Very what's the dude's name from Steve DiGiorgio? Yeah, it's got that kind of vibe, or even to some degree like a Steve Harris.
Yeah, or even like some of the stuff Cliff did, like in Master of Puppets kind of era. You know?
No, like real galloping, but it's like filling in musically. I mean, or sonically, it kind of fills in the gaps too. It's not just going along with a drum beat all the time.
And I think that allows Waters guitar wise to be a little bit more technical, and to be able to like play with notes a lot more, because he doesn't have to like keep the groove necessarily always, because the bass is able to like kind of fill in some of those.
Well, and the rhythm guitar is basically just palm muted stuff constantly, which and I don't think we mentioned he actually produced and recorded the record as well.
Yeah,
I mean the guy's kind of a hell of a I mean it's all him basically, and even the demos that are on the reissue of Alison Hell sound fantastic.
And it's him singing over it, and he's doing almost like death metal vocals.
Yeah,
which is
cool.
Is
kind of funny.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, in particular on Word Salad, I hear a lot of the sort of bass. It gives it a lot more, I guess, groove pulses and warms the album up so that it's not like a cold Steve Vai or and I don't want to knock on Vai and Satriani. They've never really been my cup of tea. I know their place in metal, but I guess I've never, like George Lynch's, as far as I take it, in terms of like the sort of masturbatory kind of guitar playing in that sort of level. You know?
I think. I mean, Lynch is more of a lead player. I don't know if he's much of a songwriter.
No,
I don't think he wrote a whole lot of the stuff in Dokken, did he? I mean, like himself. I think
not singularly. No, I think it was a combo of Don and Pilsen and them. But in terms of like some of those records that are like so technical focused, they often lack that kind of life force, and I think the bass gives it a lot of warmth and life force on this record. But there's a lot of killer leads here too, and really I think a song like this kind of puts him in the upper echelon of like kind of the Alex Skolniaks of thrash, in terms of what he's able to do with a lot of the he's almost more melodic than some of the solo players in thrash. Yeah, but he also throws in pinch harmonics a lot in this song.
Yeah, he's a mix between like of a shredder and then like a really thoughtful solo player as well.
And there's even these. I did a lot of reading and stuff, and a lot of people can hear influence from this song on players like even in the mid '90s, like a Dimebag, in terms of how he uses some of the pinch stuff. And the harmonics and things. So,
funny thing, they toured with Pantera as well.
Yeah, that's funny.
It might have been,
actually, I think I've read that.
I don't know if he was in Europe or not. He was probably on the Far Beyond Driven era.
Yeah, which probably. I wouldn't even be able to tell you what Annihilator record that was for. They're like Anvil. They have just all these like almost anonymous records that follow Never Neverland.
The funny thing is they're at 13 records as well.
Are they really? Wow. And they made it there quicker than Anvil.
And actually the newest one, Total Annihilation,
it's more like
starts out, it sounds like Arch Enemy. I mean, it starts out really strong, and then it's a little bit, it kind of dwindles. The vocally is, I'm not really.
There's some, they're almost like, and I know this might sound odd to you, but they almost remind me of like Fear Factory more now in terms of like the style of like groove riffs that they write, like a Fear Factory Pantera kind of thing. But
yeah, I can see that to some degree.
I mean, it's like almost like he's like streamlined it or moderned up the sound a little bit, and you know, an Arch Enemy and is kind of part of that sort of like modern kind of sound, that modern metal that's popular with kids these days. That's
Arch Enemy is basically
kind of stuff,
almost just thrash with death metal vocals.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know. The only other thing I want to say about this song is I wrote down at the 420 mark. This is like my favorite like solo, I think, of the whole record. Is it kind of kills me there, and I think I listened to the song like over and over again a few times today, and I wrote, a song like this reminds me of why I love thrash metal. That's just, it just has everything I like about it.
Well, it's
in this song.
It's kind of refreshing to have this, and even that Ghost record, the Opus Eponymous that came out recently. It's under the 40-minute mark, which is kind of refreshing to hear a record that's not. I think between like 1997 and 2005, records are almost all between like 60 to 74 minutes. Yeah, and that you don't need that much.
Sure, I mean, there's very few bands that like make me want to listen that long. You know?
And especially repeatedly. And it was nice to actually like it kind of. I had a little bit of nostalgia going back to when I'd have a tape and have to flip it over 5 or 6 times.
And you can listen to this like almost twice all the way through in an hour. Which is pretty sweet. Yeah. So, and then we get the aforementioned instrumental, which we kind of talked about, which is Schizos Are Never Alone, Part 1 and 2. And there's kind of like a drop down in the middle of the song where it gets quiet for a second, and that's really the break.
That's the part 2.
Yeah, but that's the only way I've been able to interpret it. And you've got, it almost reminds me of like Wake Up Dead from Megadeth, which is almost like 3 minutes of like instrumental, and then like at the very end, Dave Mustaine starts singing at the end.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know why, unless it was just something they wanted to do purely thematically to have a 2-part song. But it's basically the same song all the way through. And it doesn't even, because it's track 7, so it wouldn't even be like a side break or anything on an album. So it's just kind of...
None of it makes sense. It's just kind of probably just had this really sweet riffs and stuff like that. And then, I like the whisper, the schizos, and then the almost like dive bomb that he does, like the wee.
Well, and all of the... You can tell that this is all kind of a singular vision of one guy, just because even like, going back to Alison Hell, how... even before some of the vocal lines, it's mirrored, or like what the hell do they call it? It's like the coda or whatever. You hear it before it comes in vocally, and this stuff stands up so well without even, if you could take the vocals off, it'd be an unbelievable like fucking Champs record.
Yeah, exactly. yeah, for sure. So this is the great example that I wrote. It's like one of the 8-minute Metallica instrumentals sped up or something like that. It's got all the stuff that you need, but it's like a lot quicker punch. And then Legaia, which is what we're going to end with, which is a Edgar Allan Poe riff, or not a riff, Edgar Allan Poe story about I think loneliness, isolation, the stuff that Poe always wrote about. But
I used to be a big Poe fan in junior high.
Yeah, I liked Poe. I think I read him, early high school or something. And now it's just the Vincent Price movies that keep that flame alive. But a lot of Exodus, a lot of German thrash, a lot of Overkill things kind of going on in this song. It's got that nastiness, that sort of New York kind of thing that Overkill always had, and that the Creator and those bands kind of had, the dirtiness to it, But it's a little tighter, What thoughts did you have on Legaia?
I'm drawing a blank on that one right now.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll listen to it, and maybe you have a couple thoughts when we come back. But really, there's a lot of cool things in the bridge part of this song between the guitar and the bass. There's like a lot of intertwining that's happening. I think this is one of Randy's highlights in terms of his vocals. I like this quite a bit. And then the shred licks after the chorus. That's priceless. This is probably my third favorite song on the record after Insecticide and Word Salad. But a lot of cool solos. Very Slayer-esque solos, but like a little cleaner. If there was like a little polish to a Slayer solo, that's what.
Not so much dive bombing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, but enjoy.
My notes are such a mess that I was trying to find out if I have anything, and I just have like in a box lots of riffs. So I like this record has. Every song has a shit ton of riffs on it, but it's not to the point of where it's just like show off. Yeah, and I think that's almost like the go-to statement on this record is like it's one of those few
perfect balance.
Yeah, it's one of those few instances where you actually got like this Guitar Hero guy that can write really good songs and show off a little bit, but it all makes sense.
And it still has that underlying thrash, like in your face kind of thing to it, which sometimes gets sacrificed if you're trying to do too much like noodling or something.
Yeah, that is kind of. I can't think of a whole lot of records that really embody that kind of like ferocity and still have that kind of like the thoughtfulness or the the really technical side as well.
Yeah. All right, so enjoy Word Salad, Schizos Are Never Alone, and Ligeia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ligeia, probably, maybe.
Possibly. If not, somebody can correct it.
Yeah, exactly. It's Latin, probably.
victory. Turn off a melody. Could this be my loss? Air woman divinity. I'm soul in victory. Turn off a melody. Could this be my loss? She would die. Midnight came to lay her rest. Farewell. Opium dreams, grief-stricken years. I took another bride, replacing that which I did have. Mighty alive. Air woman divinity, my soul in victory. Turn off a melody. Could this be my loss? Air woman divinity, my soul in victory. Turn off a melody. Could this be my loss? Try disease, my luck cursed. My new wife has
The Legaia, Schizos Are Never Alone, and Word Salad, the title of the best subtitle of the year. That's up there with Heat Sink from Anvil in terms of like greatest Canadian
The Word
song
Salad
title.
sounds like a shitty word puzzle book that you'd see at the checkout at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Ah, Word Salad, sweet.
Or like somebody that was listening to a lot of like Black Sabbath Paranoid. They're like, oh, Rat Salad, that's one of my favorite songs. What could I do with that?
Ah, Word Salad.
But Legaia, we were just kind of rocking out to there, and definitely you were talking about the type of speed picking that he does, and that he's playing all like down.
The
riffs.
down picking, yeah. Like I guess Metallica is really well known for that as well. That to get that heavy, really chunk sound, but it's like unbelievably. It gets. I mean, as the album escalates, it's just so fast. It's kind of retarded, but it's not just pure blinding speed. There's actually like fairly thoughtful like breakdowns too. Mm-hmm. And as I was writing a couple notes down, and there's definitely lots of like overkillisms into that as well, but also almost like Pig Destroyer as far as like the riffs. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many great riffs in the song. You could build an entire album on one basically one song worth of riffs on this record.
Yeah. It's that's weird that I hadn't made that distinction between. That's kind of what Pig Destroyer really does, is they're just kind of taking those riffs and merging them together. But yeah, they're playing like longer versions of like several Pig Destroyer songs, kind of like merged together or something.
Yeah, it just has that same kind of like eye for good riffs, and the punk bass lines too are pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I was commenting about how the guitar and the bass were really working together in that Ligea song so well, and you definitely hear it, a lot of Steve Harris kind of stuff and mixed with like kind of you even mentioned like the punk kind of style that Harris did on like Killers and the first Iron Maiden.
Yeah, one of the good riffs on the Ligea song. I mean, sounds like it would have been on Killers, but also there's like a riff that sounds like it would have been on the first Vader record.
Yeah, we totally pointed that out. And I never think of Vader when I'm listening to stuff. Vader's such a left field.
Everybody should always think of Vader at least once a week.
Once a week, I know, and we love Vader here. But the album closes with kind of the masterpiece for. All the songs are kind of masterpieces in their own way, but this might be my favorite song. I don't know where you stand with that. I know
it's close. I mean, it's one of those kind of closing songs that it's not like an epic song, but it's a song that makes you want to turn the record back on again and listen to the whole thing again.
This is kind of their Angel of Death or something. You know, it's like they're just like, explosion of speed and energy and speed picking and all these things. It's the fastest riff on the record.
There's like 4 distinct times where there's like this whammy bar thing where it goes almost to like catch your breath to get back into it again.
Yeah. Which almost you point out how old like Black Sabbath kind of drone feel.
Yeah,
to
it almost like like a Sabbath riff as they're doing that little whammy thing,
which is cool. So, and he, you definitely said he's inspired by classic rock and classic metal. So it's not just that he's ponying off of Overkill and Metallica and Megadeth in terms of his influences and stuff. So
and it almost seems like I don't know if this is like a sign of like somebody that really studies music, but it never sounds like he's ripping off somebody's riffs, but he's like he's gleaning some of like the approach to how they write riffs, or how they construct songs. So it's a really weird kind of, it's not like, because Pig Destroyer has that same kind of thing to where it's like
you feel like you've heard
all of these riffs, but you can never place exactly where they come from.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So, but Human Insecticide, which is one of the coolest choruses for sure on the record,
which wouldn't it just be Human Side?
Humanicide, yeah.
But Human Insecticide sounds cooler.
It sounds Canadian. It sounds like definitely a Canadian approach.
Well, it's like something I would have come up with when I was like 17.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Oh yeah, that sounds. Yeah.
Man, you're like Human Insecticide.
And it's funny after I finally finished listening to this record today and writing notes and stuff, I wrote and put a little circle around that this album is very youthful. There's something, there's an exuberance to it, and it's
enthusiasm. And I mean, these guys. Well, the whole record was wrote and recorded before they had a record deal. So I mean, they were doing it for the love of the music as well, which I think
keeping these songs preserved.
Most metal is.
Yeah.
Nobody really gets rich unless you're like Metallica.
Yeah. But here you got the Angel of Death kind of speed picking riff mixed with like Iron Maiden melodies, kind of going on. Very Exodus, very even Anthrax, some of their like fastest like mosh kind of stuff.
Oh, totally.
You picked up on here. So and it's a Raining Blood kind of riff, but like kind of done cleaner, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if this is something that. Well, I think everything's really clean and apparent. All the notes. There's no muddiness at all to this thing. And even when I was watching one of the Gibson interviews with Jeff Waters, where it was like his custom Annihilator guitar or whatever, and the way that the fretboard was set up, he likes to have really clean, like where all the notes are heard. He doesn't like any of the muddiness. So whatever, that must have been a conscious decision on his part to kind of do that.
And plus, he produced it, so he definitely knew what he was trying to do. And then I also, and you and I talked about this. This is very proto-Gothenburg, and we've brought up Arch Enemy and we've brought up Children of Bodom, but definitely that
In Flames, and I mean a lot of like Jester Race. I can hear a lot of these kind of riffs,
And you said that Jesper from In Flames was very reverent towards Jeff Waters.
And Waters was like, well, they kind of like mutually bowing to one another because they're almost on the same, I guess, level, really.
Yeah.
In just different crowds, but I mean. Yeah, I mean, In Flames now is, I guess, a pretty big
band. Yeah, which is weird. It's hard for me to. Them and Opeth, it's kind of weird to think that those bands have gone to where they are today.
Oh yeah, speaking of Opeth, Ackerfeld made it number 9 on the 100 best guitarists list.
Oh, did he?
Which I don't think I agree with, but that's what lists are for, to spark discussion.
I don't know. I'm a Ackerfeld fan, but.
He's good, but he's not one out of all the greatest metal guitarists ever.
Yeah. But see, I wouldn't put Zakk Wylde top 5 either. You know, I mean, there's
no.
a lot
I would
of,
say I'd have like these little like sidebars that said like best use of pinch harmonics.
yeah, exactly.
Zakk Wylde.
Zakk Wylde's a pinch harmonic connoisseur.
Yeah,
you know?
watch him play any Ozzy stuff live, and it's just kind of retarded. It's like, okay,
always
every
on,
note.
Always on Metal Mania, they have that Bark at the Moon live version. He's just like pinch harmonicking everything.
And he's sloppy too, which I kind of like as a player.
Yeah.
He's exuberant.
That's the other thing, you know. I mean, I think if you're going to do a list like that, you've got to have these different categories, and maybe not have it be like 100 that are all related to each other, but maybe 10 top 10 lists. You know, top 10 like punk, style guitarists, top 10 thrash guys. You know,
yeah. And I don't know if the way the book is broken up, if there's just like a justification of his choice for each or whatever.
You know,
but
because I think Ackerfeld, if you're talking about like encapsulating all these different styles and like melodies and stuff like that, I mean, he's up there, you know, but he's not the flashiest guy, and he's not the most technical guy, and he's not writing the most.
But it goes Ackerfeld and then Hetfield.
Yeah,
okay.
But I mean, Hetfield's more of a rhythm player too, so it's like, you know, he's a great rhythm
guitarist, songwriter as well.
Yeah,
you know. So
but Hammett was like the guy who was always known for the leads, but at the same time, like, you know, Hetfield's.
I don't think he could write a song out of a bag.
No, I don't think he can either. So again, that's what I mean. How do you determine it? Is it technique based? Is it, you know, what's your?
So I guess as a conversation starter, lists are a great idea.
Yeah.
But otherwise they're utterly futile.
Sure. And we of course are
we'll have a list here pretty soon.
Great connoisseurs of lists, you know. So, but Human Insecticide, it's a good way to sort of close things out on our Hall of Fame Canadian Metal Part 2 show. And we're definitely going to get into the more extreme side of Canadian metal coming up soon, and kind of the other side of Canada that Canada, I guess, is known for.
The darker side. The dark side of Canada.
Yeah. The sci-fi tech side or something, whatever you want to call it.
And I think if you enjoyed what you heard of Alison Hell, go out and buy the 2 from the vault.
Yeah.
Not to make us money, but to put a couple bucks in Water's pocket to keep putting on.
He's a metal warrior, man. He's been doing this.
He's living the dream.
Yeah, been doing this for a long time. So let us know what you thought. Maybe you're new to Annihilator, so let us know if you kind of thought the same thing we did when we first heard this not too long ago, which is, wow, where'd this come from? You know. And
where have you been all my life?
Yeah, and if you're an old school Annihilator fan, which I know, like, you know, Rishi and some of our kind of longtime listeners are, you know, just hopefully maybe we nailed the record in the same way that you like it, or maybe not. So give us some feedback. Shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook, Mark and Jason, or check us out on the website.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put a link to our Facebook page on the website, because I noticed it's not there.
There you go. That would be wise.
But
even though we have like a jillion fans now, like I get like 15 requests a day, but which is cool. I just don't know if everyone.
But since we have if you guys really appreciate the show that much, you know, it would really be great keeping in with the holiday
Christmas
spirit.
holiday season. Yeah.
Would, you know, throw us whatever you feel, you know, the virtual tip jar that we have on the site to help, because our hosting bill will be coming up in the next month or so. And anything, we've gotten many generous donations from people, but every little bit helps. So if you'd like to see the show keep on going and make us that much more enthusiastic to keep doing it, which we do it because we love it, but all these extra costs start to add up too. So
I would like to buy that Sacrifice record so we could have done a proper show. The thing costs $35.
Well, and that's the thing with every time we do research for one of these shows, even though I can't afford it, I end up buying 2 or 3 records or filling out an entire back catalog of whatever. So it's
and two, we have some great gift ideas as well. We've got the
we have
mug,
an iPhone
the t-shirt
4 case right now too. If you just bought an iPhone 4 and you can't find a great case, go to requiempodcast.com and click on the merchandise link, and we have a fantastic looking Baphomet iPhone case. And
didn't you say we got a travel coffee mug thing?
Travel coffee mugs as well
for those of you that commute in the morning, like myself, and drink your coffee.
Exactly.
So show your Requiem metal pride, I guess.
Or T-shirts as well. I saw a friend of mine on another podcast actually was sporting. It was a family vacation picture, and he had his Requiem Metal podcast shirt holding his daughter.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, yeah, and then then when you come to the Maryland Metal Fest, those of you that are American, fans, you guys can one day. We'll maybe say Friday or Saturday will be Requiem Metal
meetup.
Yeah, we'll have we'll buy a round of drinks or something. So
depending on how many people are there.
Yeah, exactly.
So donate today if you want to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. So enjoy Human Insecticide from Alison Hell. We hope you appreciate this record as much as we did, and we'll be back soon with some more Canadian tomfoolery. So for Annihilator, I'm Jason,
and I'm Mark.